What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Puffin Movie Review, the only corner of the internet where we pack a fresh bowl, sit back, and unpack the wildest cinematic histories out there. If you are new here, or if you've been rolling with us for a while, do me a massive favor. Hit that subscribe button and tap the like button. We are on a serious mission to hit that 1,000 subscriber milestone, and every single one of you joining the session helps the channel grow. Today, we are starting a massive deep dive into the behind-the-scenes history of a film that is absolutely mesmerizing to watch when your mind is in the right space. Mel Gibson's 2006 masterpiece, Apocalypto. Let's spark this thing up and look at how this insane project was first conceived. The whole genesis of this movie actually started during the post-production of The Passion of the Christ. Screenwriter and co-producer Farhad Safina was working as an assistant on that project when he met Mel Gibson. The two of them started talking about their mutual love for filmmaking and what really got their creative juices flowing. Eventually, those late-night conversations turned toward the action chase genre. They both felt that modern action blockbusters had become completely stale, just overloaded with computer-generated graphics, predictable stock stories, and incredibly shallow characters. They wanted to shake up the entire system, but instead of adding more technology, they decided to do the exact opposite. They wanted to strip the chase genre down to its absolute bare, most primitive skeleton, a single human being running for his absolute life through the jungle, trying to get back to the family that matters to him. Gibson wanted the foot chase to feel like an intense car chase that just keeps turning the screws on the audience's anxiety.
Each person looks different.
While developing the concept, Gibson and Safina knew they wanted to set this chase inside an ancient civilization before any Europeans ever set foot on the continent. They initially looked at both the Aztecs and the Maya, but they quickly realized the Maya were significantly more fascinating for what they wanted to achieve. Safina noted that while you can easily pick a civilization that is just purely bloodthirsty, the Maya offered a massive contradiction. They were incredibly sophisticated, possessing an immense, mind-boggling knowledge of medicine, science, archaeology, and engineering. Yet, right alongside that brilliance, they practiced an intensely brutal undercurrent of ritual savagery. Exploring why a society that advanced could decline into that level of violence was exactly the story they wanted to tell. To make sure they weren't just making things up as they went, the duo dove headfirst into deep research. They spent months reading ancient Maya creation and destruction myths, including sacred texts like the Popol Vuh. They even traveled across Guatemala, Costa Rica, and the Yucatan Peninsula to physically scout locations and walk through actual Maya ruins to get a genuine feel for the environment. To bridge the gap between imagination and history, they hired a heavy-hitting consultant named Richard D. Hansen. He was an assistant professor of archaeology at Idaho State University and the director of the Mirador Basin Project, dedicated to preserving the Guatemalan rainforest. Gibson completely fell in love with the guy's infectious enthusiasm, stating that Hansen gave the crew the security that what they were writing maintained a beautiful balance of real authenticity and creative imagination. They even brought in modern-day Maya culture directly into the script. The old shaman story told around the fire in the movie was adapted from an authentic Mesoamerican tale. It was translated into the Yucatec Maya language by Hilario Chi, a literal professor of Maya who stayed on set during the entire production to serve as the team's official dialogue coach. Man, just thinking about the amount of prep work that went into setting up this ancient world before a single camera even rolled is wild. When it came time to actually roll cameras, Mel Gibson took the crew deep into the Mexican state of Veracruz, specifically setting up camp in places like Catemaco, San Andres Tuxtla, and Paso de Ovejas. They also had second unit crews deep in the dense greenery of El Petén, Guatemala, to capture those massive forest backdrops. Now, if you've ever been out in the elements after a heavy session, you know nature does whatever it wants. The movie was originally supposed to hit theaters in August of 2006, but the weather absolutely destroyed their schedule. They got hit by heavy, unrelenting tropical rains and 2 separate hurricanes while filming in Mexico. It pushed principal photography all the way until July of 2006, forcing Touchstone Pictures to delay the official release date to December. To capture the raw, frenetic energy of a guy running for his life, Gibson and his legendary cinematographer Dean Semler made a pretty risky tech choice for 2005. They chose to shoot the entire movie on high-definition digital video using the Panavision Genesis camera, back when digital wasn't the standard yet. For that heart-stopping moment where Jaguar Paw leaps off the massive cliff to escape his captors, they shot at the actual Ipantla Falls in San Andres Tuxtla. To get the shot, they rigged up a Spydercam, which is this crazy suspended cable camera system that lets you shoot from way up in the air. The waterfall rig, they put this expensive Genesis digital camera inside a lightweight waterproof housing and dropped it right over the edge of the 150-foot waterfall, tracking right over the actor's shoulder as he plunged. The conditions were brutal. It was over 100 degrees at the top of the waterfall, but down at the bottom, dealing with the freezing river water and thick mist, the temperature plummeted to about 60 degrees. They managed to shoot two 50-minute tapes straight through, only running into trouble once when water leaked into the housing and fogged up the lens. They also had a ton of real wildlife on set, including a Baird's tapir and a massive black jaguar. Obviously, for any scenes where an animal could have been injured, they swapped them out for incredibly realistic animatronics and puppets. If you look at the raw numbers from the review aggregators, the critics were generally down with the vibe, even if some of them couldn't handle the absolute bloodbath on screen. Rotten Tomatoes, it pulled a 65% approval rating across 202 reviews with an average score of 6 out of 10. The official consensus called it a brilliantly filmed, if mercilessly bloody, examination of a once great civilization. Accurate. Metacritic sitting at a 68 out of 100 based on 37 critics, landing it in the generally favorable zone. CinemaScore everyday audiences who caught it in theaters gave it a B+, which is honestly great for a brutal, subtitled action thriller with no massive star power in front of the camera. The big critics' legendary duos like Richard Roeper and Aisha Tyler gave it a solid 2 thumbs up, while Michael Medved went all out, giving it 4 out of 4 stars and calling it an adrenaline-drenched chase movie and a visceral visual experience.
To Mel Gibson. Did Gibson get store treatment by police?
Now, we have to talk about the massive elephant in the room back in late 2006. This movie dropped less than 6 months after Mel Gibson's infamous DUI arrest. The media was in an absolute frenzy, and a lot of folks were ready to completely write him off, especially with the lingering baggage from the Passion of the Christ. What's wild is how the critics just couldn't ignore the real-life drama. It literally bled straight into their reviews. They had to ask themselves, can we praise a masterpiece if the guy behind the camera is completely unhinged in public? Check out what A.O. Scott wrote for the New York Times. Say what you will about him, about his problem with booze or his problem with Jews, he is a serious filmmaker. The Boston Globe doubled down on that exact same energy. Gibson may be a lunatic, but he's our lunatic. While I wouldn't wish him behind the wheel of a car after happy hour or at a B'nai B'rith function any time, behind a camera is another matter. Not everyone was willing to look past it, though. The folks over at Salon dropped a harsh reality check, writing that people were only turning up for extra textual reasons, calling Mel an erratic figure who only stayed relevant because he possessed a crude gift for crafting violent pop entertainment. Even with the intense toxic cloud surrounding Mel's personal life, the actual filmmaking inside Apocalypto was so undeniably elite that some of the greatest directors and actors of all time openly stood up to champion it. This wasn't just casual praise, these guys were deeply blown away. Quentin Tarantino. I think it's a masterpiece. It was perhaps the best film of that year. I think it was the best artistic film of that year. Robert Duvall went even further, calling it maybe the best movie I've seen in 25 years. Edward James Olmos. I was totally caught off guard. I was blown away. Even Martin Scorsese penned a beautiful defense of the film's artistic value. Many pictures today don't go into troubling areas like this. The importance of violence in the perpetuation of what's known as civilization. I admire Apocalypto for its frankness, but also for the power and artistry of the filmmaking. The love for this movie didn't stop in 2006 either. It has serious staying power. Spike Lee added it to his all-time list of essential films in 2013. British visionary Edgar Wright named it one of his 1,000 favorite movies in 2016, and RR director S.S. Rajamouli officially voted for it in the prestigious 2022 Sight and Sound poll. When the masters of cinema are copying your homework, you did something right. Let's break down where Apocalypto got the history completely twisted, and why it sparked an absolute firestorm. The single biggest bone the experts have to pick with this movie is a massive case of mistaken identity. The movie is supposed to be about the Maya, but a huge chunk of what you see on screen is actually stolen straight from Aztec culture. The mass sacrifices, that wild, bloody spectacle on top of the pyramid, hundreds of people getting their hearts carved out in a single afternoon. Historians point out that mass industrial-scale sacrifices and widespread slavery were classic Aztec moves. The Maya definitely practiced human sacrifice, but it was usually a much smaller, deeply personal ritual. The victim pool in Maya culture. They didn't just harvest random poor people from the woods to sacrifice. They usually sacrificed captive nobility and high society elites from rival cities. A historical smoothie scholar, Alan Wall, pointed out that the art, the architecture, and the overall setting of the city are a total mashup of completely different regions and eras of Mayan civilization that never actually existed at the same time. Now, to be fair, a Mayanist named David Stewart did step up to say that human sacrifice wasn't exactly rare among the Maya, and that there were actually a lot of similarities between them and the Aztecs. But most experts still felt like Mel was painting with an incredibly messy, hyper-violent brush. Savages who needed saving? Beyond the technical inaccuracies, indigenous activists and anthropologists were deeply hurt by the vibe of the film. They felt Mel went out of his way to highlight the absolute worst, most brutal aspects of the culture while completely ignoring the cool stuff. Anthropologist Tracy Ardren argued that the film was completely biased because it totally skipped over everything the Maya were actually famous for. No mention is made of the achievements in science and art, the profound spirituality and connection to agricultural cycles, or the engineering feats of Maya cities. Guatemalan activist Ignacio Ochoa went even harder, calling it an offensive narrative that made it look like the Maya were so relentlessly brutal to one another that they practically deserved or needed to be rescued by the Europeans showing up at the end. Even Richard D. Hansen, the actual historical consultant hired to work on the film, confessed in an interview that the finished product definitely makes the Maya look like a sadistic lot. He admitted he was pretty nervous about how modern Maya descendants would take it. Hansen's main defense was that the movie is set during the post-classic period, right at the tail end of Maya history. By that time, they were heavily influenced by the Toltecs and the Aztecs, which is why a coastal city like Tulum had to build massive defensive walls. According to him, the ruthless Aztec pursuit of sacrificial victims had naturally spilled over into Maya territory. Man, at the end of the day, Apocalypto is just one of those movies that completely hijacks your nervous system, especially if you're watching it after a proper smoke session. It might not get an A+ from a history professor, but as a pure, relentless cinematic achievement, Mel Gibson and that crew built a masterpiece of tension that directors are still copying 20 years later. But I want to hear from you. Does the historical inaccuracy ruin the vibe for you? Or are you just here for the absolute adrenaline rush of that foot chase? And let's be real, if you were the one running through that thick jungle, how long are you lasting before you completely pass out? Drop your thoughts down in the comments, and let's talk about it. If you enjoyed sparking up and breaking down this wild production history with me today, please hit that like button. It genuinely helps the algorithm push our videos out there. And if you haven't yet, do me a massive favor and hit subscribe. We are pushing incredibly hard right now to hit that 1,000 subscriber milestone, and every single one of you joining the community makes a massive difference to the channel. Thank you so much for hanging out today. Pack a fresh one, stay safe, keep it completely chill, and I will see you right here for the next review.